now a Polaris Prize winner. Backxwash is a Canadian rapper who also dabbles in the heavy genres as well, such as metal, industrial rock, and all the loud things. Backxwash really caught my attention with a few singles. I think it was at the start of 2020 that I caught on late to some of her tracks that were leading up to the album that ended up being the Polaris Prize winner. I thought there was a really creative approach to the tracks. I like how there wasn't like a corniness to this mashup of kind of like the rock and the metal coming together, fusing together with the rap elements, which we know for many years this has been a hard line to toe. There's a lot of artists who I don't really have to name, but in the 2000s particularly, tried fusing these styles together, and it just made for a very a very messy sound that hasn't necessarily aged all that well. Some tracks still bang though. Some tracks still bang. Let's not act like some tracks don't still bang. They do. But Backxwash goes for a very nightmarish style, talking about her experiences as being transgender and being black as well. Just many interesting insights to the world of Backxwash. That mental health is brought up on many tracks too. The lyrics are always worded in a really kind of like terrifying and disgusting way, and very depressing at times too. But I think that approach can really make for some interesting music when it's done right. Sometimes it may not always, land well if the lyrics are a bit cliche and things like that, but I think Backxwash does a good job at avoiding those. There's also like this emphasis on pain too, which you totally get immediately from this album with the track Purpose of Pain, which is this little like voice recording thing. Not entirely sure where it's taken from, but this person talking about what the meaning of pain is and what we do in regards to pain, and maybe how we even like pain and things like that. It's a bit of a running theme throughout the album too, definitely an emphasis on that in some of the lyrics, but immediately you get Wall of Banshee, which is just this very heavy track that focuses so much on the drums, and I feel as though sometimes that can be something that takes away from like a melody or something, but not really in this case. Backxwash nails this, and there's this dreading pace too. Very, very disturbing. Like, there's a disturbing feeling to this track that I can't quite describe. It's like this existential dread that's like consuming you, and you're just not entirely sure where your life is going or what's about to come around the corner. It's a very impactful track. And then the track that immediately comes after, which is the title track to this album, still feel the same way as I did when I first reacted to that track. Honestly, just hell. It's an absolute hellish song. It's a nightmare. It's terrifying. It's just so brutal and revolting in so many ways. The vocals on the chorus are just so ooh. And it does feature Ada Rook on the chorus too, who is of Black Dresses, an artist that took me quite some time to really get around and appreciate, but their album this year was actually my favorite of theirs so far, so there's definitely potential for me to really dig deeper into their discography and find a lot to love, because I think there are elements of this album, especially this track, that feel very heavily influenced by Black Dresses. Really it gets that nightmarish, just excruciating pain that those guys over at Black Dresses managed to achieve in their music. I also like how Terror Packets is a very different track in terms of how it sounds to the title track, but actually the haunting feeling that you get is actually similar. Like there's another feeling that you get listening to this track that just hits you in a similar way to the previous track, even though they sound very different, which makes me think that Backxwash is actually just really good conveying an emotion through the sound of her music. It's impressive, and I feel as though everything she says just matches that feeling too. Talking about even losing her soul on this track, it's very devilish, it's very satanic, and I think any heavy religious people listening to this album would probably cry. I don't know. Just stray away from this if you're heavily religious. In Thy Holy Name references religion probably the most too on the chorus, you know, referencing Jesus. Kind of makes me feel as though this track is just kind of like trying to dismantle the idea of like following some kind of leader, because, you know, you're essentially just following someone and not really thinking for yourself. There's references to like homosexuality on this track too. Just very, again, impactful with the way it's conveyed lyrically, and just kind of tries like tying things together in a way that just pokes flaws in the idea of religion. Anything that tends to reference religion in music is always interesting to me if it's done in a way that I really find compelling, and I feel like, again, tracks like this do that in quite a good way. Blood in the Water is an insane track vocally. This is the best vocal performance from Backxwash on the whole thing, hands down. Backxwash's voice here is crazy. Oh my god, I can't describe how Backxwash is doing that thing with her voice. It's just insane, and I wish the track developed a bit more, because this track just feels like a bit of a stopgap between that, you know, the previous track and the next track. I think if there was like an instrumental that just kind of came crashing through in a really interesting way, that could have been like the best song on the whole album. But it's not that it's bad, it's just me thinking I wanted a bit more from what it ended up being. But goddamn, the vocals here. Backxwash has a really unique voice in general, and I think this track really heightens that uniqueness. The 666 in Luxaxa, I'm not sure how you say that word, Luxaxa, is an interesting track where there's a direct mention of Mr. Justin Trudeau, the man himself, the Canadian man himself, referencing, of course, the scandal that he got caught up in where he was doing blackface many years ago. And I feel like what Backxwash is trying to do here is just trying to say, like, you know, he was always a racist, but this has just come out and, you know, Backxwash knew all along. Really interesting direct reference to Trudeau here. I wasn't expecting a name drop like that. But I don't know, Backxwash can be pretty intense and brutal when she wants to be. She just kind of like directly references things and isn't really afraid to just say what's on her mind. But does also like tie together some of the main themes of the album, being like, you know, referencing hell, and also how you can, you know, make links to people working in government, people leading the country, and also being like, you know, the devil or 666. Just a pretty surface level way to do it, I guess, but, you know, another way of just making interesting parallels between things on this album. Nine Hells, that's one of my favorite instrumentals on the album. The industrial, heavy, almost like electronically tinged beat that's coming through kind of reminds me of like someone like 9 Inch Nails, which I think is probably an obvious comparison. I've seen a few people already make comparisons to 9 Inch Nails already, but if the boot fits, the boot fits. It kind of works. But I have to talk about Burnt to Ashes, which closes out the album. This is definitely the best song here. Wow, this track is really, really impressive. Everything from the Godspeed sample, which is insane how Backxwash managed to get that past. But also just how her vocals really work well over this instrumental too. It's probably the most memorable track, because I think with this album is that when a track is finished, as impactful as it is in the moment, it's not always easy to remember how it sounds after, you know, once you've got to the end of the album. That's one thing I noticed listening through this album multiple times. But Burn to Ashes seems to be the one that sticks out the most. It also cuts deep lyrically, kind of tying in that whole pain thing that comes through on some of these tracks throughout the album as well. Wishing sepsis on herself, saying that she deserves it as well. Things like that, really brutal lyrically, pretty howling and depressing, honestly. But yeah, just a fantastically crafted and structured track, like really impressive, and a fantastic way to close out an album too. Like, what a way to leave a mark. You're going to finish your album on a track like this. that's a way to close out an album. So yeah, really good album. Just like I said, something in some moments that just don't feel as memorable as like her previous album. I think ultimately I do prefer that one more, just for the more memorable moments I think that one provided. But I think this is more of like a transition anyway. I don't think this album was meant to do the same thing as her previous one did, given that it is heavier. There's a huge emphasis on like the industrial elements, the metal elements, the really intensifying, blood-curdling instrumentals that come through, and the vocal performances that come through as well. I think this album was obviously trying to take a different approach. So going down the line, maybe this album could stick with me more, because if you guys remember, I did give Backxwash a 7 out of 10 originally, and then that album grew to be one of my favorite albums of the year. So similarly here, I'm going to give this album a 7 out of 10, but who knows, by December I could be shooting myself in the face and telling you guys I was wrong. This actually isn't a 7, it's better than that, but still really good overall. Hopefully you guys like this as well. Backxwash is killing it, really, honestly, getting lots of attention through music nerd circles. The growth that Backxwash has had in popularity, it's just so good to see. It's so good to see. I like it when artists like this just start growing, when their music is just so impressive, and it's so deserved too. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you agree, disagree, if you like this, if you don't like this, I'd love to hear what you think. Really interested to see what people think of this one. If you think it's better than the album from last year, if you think this is better, if you think it's worse, whatever, let me know. Thank you for watching this review. Have a good day. Subscribe if you have not already, and goodbye.